Hey everybody, welcome to the Mana Leek. I'm John as always, and it's time for the Black Eldritch Moon set review. Of course, there are 3 quick disclaimers. Those are covered in the first 2 videos, most important of which, this is a limited set review. I will be talking about draft and sealed exclusively. I will not be addressing standard or any sort of constructed formats or things like that. But we're going to jump right on into the first card. Up first, we have Boon of M. Boon of M is 2 and a black for an enchantment aura at common. It says enchant creature. Enchanted creature gets +3, -3. This is relatively solid removal. It's a couple mana more expensive than Deadweight for only 1 more toughness decrease, but it'll kill so many more things than Deadweight will. You could, of course, pop this on your own creature that's an X4 or greater, but that's probably not commonly going to be the right play unless you're ridiculously ahead already and going to win anyways, in which case it's really a win more card. You really probably should be using this as removal. This does seem like pretty solid removal, and I think I would first pick this in packs that are lacking a bomb or any sort of unconditional removal. Seems like a solid card, and I'm very happy giving it a B-. Up next, we have Borrowed Malevolence. Borrowed Malevolence is a single black mana for an instant at common. It has Escalate 2, choose one or both. Target creature gets +1/+1 until end of turn. Target creature gets -1/-1 until end of turn. This doesn't seem super awesome to me. -1/-1 is really weak, so it's not super common you're going to be using this as just straight up removal. There are, of course, a number of X1s that you could get with this, but it's probably not the best use of this card. Tacking on 2 mana to boost something isn't super worth it as well, but it does turn it into kind of an okay combat trick. It virtually functions as like a -2/-2 combat trick, so it is probably playable, just not terribly exciting. I think you can probably cut this pretty reliably anytime that you don't have space for a combat trick. If you do have space for a combat trick, here you go, and you shouldn't feel too bad playing it. But if you can't quite make space for a combat trick, there's no reason to absolutely include this. Should be a mid to late pack pickup. I'm going to go with a C. Cemetery Recruitment is next. It's 1 and a black for a sorcery at common. Return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. If it's a zombie card, draw a card. I'm never terribly impressed by these cards. I don't really care for Dutiful Return or Macabre Waltz or anything like that, and I don't super care for this one either. You know, it's really slow. You're spending a card to get a card back. You do get to draw a card if you are in the zombie deck, and that's pretty cool, and that probably bumps this up ever so slightly. I'd probably be inclined to give this a C-, but if you do have a decent number of zombies, and it looks like the zombie deck is a thing in Eldritch Moon, the parts were starting to be there in Shadows, but it just didn't exist there. But it is a thing now, so I am willing to bump this up to a C, but this still just isn't the type of card that I usually like to play. I don't typically care for this spell, and we've seen it set in, set out. I'll play it when I'm desperate for a 23rd card. It's probably like a quarter of a step better than that, but I'm going to go with a C. Next up, we have Certain Death. Certain Death is 5 and a black for a sorcery at common. It says destroy target creature. Its controller loses 2 life, and you gain 2 life. Hey look! Sip of Hemlock is back from Theros, except it's easier to cast because it's not black, it's 5 and a black, and you gain that 2 life that your opponent loses. That's a pretty serious upgrade to Sip of Hemlock. Sip of Hemlock was begrudgingly playable in the Theros format because that basically was the removal that you had access to. In this set we have Murder. We have even Murderous Compulsion, and, you know, we have way better removal in this set than we did in Theros. That makes this look a lot less appealing. This, I think, is second string removal, kind of in the likes of Reduced to Ashes, because it's a 6-drop, because it's sorcery speed, so it shouldn't be that high of a pick, and it should probably be cut in a good number of situations. It is unconditional removal, but it's super expensive, and just simply not made for every deck. I think it's a solid C, just because it does absolutely need to be cut sometimes. If you're aggressive, if you're kind of capping out at 4 or even 5, is like you have 1 5-drop, you probably don't want to throw this in your deck. It's just way too expensive. If you're really hurting for removal, obviously in Sealed this becomes basically always playable because Sealed will be a slower format, it always is, but in Draft, make sure you know when to cut this. Every deck doesn't want to play this card, despite being removal. So I am going to go with a C. Next up, we have Collective Brutality. Collective Brutality is 1 and a black for a sorcery at rare. It says escalate, discard a card. Choose one or more. Target opponent reveals his or her hand. You choose an instant or sorcery card from it. That player discards that card. And target creature gets -2/-2 until end of turn. Or target opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. This one's interesting. I'm not too happy that it's a rare, but it of course has to be a rare because it's part of this collective cycle with collective efforts, and it's probably a little tiny bit too complex to be at a lower rarity than that. But nothing here really feels like a rare exactly. So the default mode in the start of the show I think is -2/-2. It's sorcery speed -2/-2, which basically means this is an expensive deadweight. Still, you can use this to kill a decent number of things, and maybe even some bigger things after combat if need be in the second main phase. But the other modes, Mode 1, you're never going to be using in Limited. You're never going to use that mode. You should basically never play Duress unless you know there's a really juicy target for you to hit that you just cannot possibly beat if they actually cast that instant or sorcery. Mode 3 is fine, but I would only do it if you have a Madness card, or you have a land and you already have 8 of them out or something like that, or as a way to finish off your opponent. I do really like that this does give Madness, some decent outlets here. I would love to cast this for 2 mana, plus get a Fiery Temper off of it, and make that Fiery Temper also have a 4 life swing attached to it. I do really like that, and so I think this is, pretty decently playable, and I think it's a relatively high pick. I don't think I would probably first pick it unless the pack was really weak, but I will go with a B- on this. I think it is a solid card all around. It's just not quite as powerful as you'd expect a rare to be, so B-. Next up, we have Cryptbreaker. Cryptbreaker is a single black mana for a creature zombie at rare. It's a 1/1. You can pay 1 and a black, tap it, and discard a card to put a 2/2 black zombie creature token onto the battlefield. You can then tap 3 untapped zombies you control to draw a card and lose a life. And of course, it doesn't say another zombie, so you can tap Cryptbreaker as one of those 3 zombies. Total disclosure here, I'm probably going to tap and untap my zombies a bunch and pretend they're dancing to Thriller. Just because. So we've got a 1/1 for 1 that's an alright discard outlet. Not being free is a slight pain, but it's just 2 mana and you get a 2/2 out of it, so pretty darn solid. If you have enough zombies, we can really start getting some card advantage here. I'm not sold on this being amazing in Limited. If you have that many zombies kicking around, you probably should just be attacking with them and winning. It does help you get out of board stalls by drawing into things, but if you have 3 zombies, you shouldn't be in a situation where you really need to be doing this a whole bunch. But if you can, it's gravy on top of everything. I think this does belong a little bit more in like a standard zombies deck or a commander zombies deck or something like that. So ultimately, I do think this is pretty darn cool, but I don't think it's going to be a bomb or an all-star. It could be a slight build around me card. I think it'll be fine, and I think it will be a decent early pickup to help out Madness and zombies, but I don't think it's quite bomb level. So I am going to go with a B. I think you probably should pass this for premium removal, a more bomby flip card, but it is still decent, so I'm going to go with a B. Up next, we have Dark Salvation. Dark Salvation is an XX black sorcery at rare. It says target player puts X 2/2 black zombie creature tokens onto the battlefield. Then, up to 1 target creature gets -1/-1 until end of turn for each zombie that player controls. There's been some confusion on the wording of this card, and it's definitely worded a little bit awkwardly. You choose a player to give the zombies to. That's probably going to be you in 99.999% of cases. Then you target any creature, and that creature gets -1/-1 for how many zombies you control. There's some pronoun problem things going on there, but if you read it very carefully, it does make sense. Basically, you get the zombies, and you get to do -2/-2 to whatever you want for zombies that you control. I'm not super excited about this card. It feels very similar to Under the Floorboards, which I also found just kind of fine, but not great. It does have removal attached to it, hopefully, and not life gain, which from Under the Floorboards did. As well, these zombies do come onto the battlefield untapped, whereas the Floorboards ones were tapped. I guess it took them some time to get out of those Floorboards. So 3 mana for a 2/2 and -1/-1 is worth it mostly, but unlikely to do too much. It's probably not going to kill very many things. 5 mana for 2/2/2s and -2/2 is all right. You know, that's Geese's Bidding with a deadweight attached to it. So that's fine. 3 zombies for -3/3 for 7 mana is starting to get too expensive. That's probably the top end of this. So ultimately, I don't see getting too much use out of this outside of being in a dedicated zombie deck. You know, if you get 2 2/2s and you already have a couple of zombies, then this just becomes a removal spell. And so it does get a fair bit better. And so I could see it being first pickable with the intention of jumping into zombies hard. And of course, if you're already kind of in zombies and you see this impact too, it's going to feel even better. So I am willing to go with a B on it, but I think you do really want to be in that zombies deck. If you're in a black, white, kind of not zombies deck or a black-red vampires deck, I think this does get a little bit worse and goes kind of to like B-, even maybe C+ level. But I am going to sit on a B with this. I think you can first pick this and build around it. It gets so much better in zombies decks, so solid B. Next up, we have Dusk Feaster. Dusk Feaster is a 5 black creature vampire at uncommon. She's a 4/5. She has Delirium. Dusk Feaster costs 2 less to cast if you have Delirium, and she has flying. Yeah, this is a little pricey. 7 mana for a 4/5 flyer is just not okay with me. Not for a vanilla flyer. That's way too expensive for basically any deck. Knocking that down to 5 for a 4/5 flyer makes this okay. But you need to be pretty certain that you will have Delirium online with some regularity by turn 5. If you can almost guarantee that you will, then this is probably like a C+, I think. But I think all but the most consistent of Delirium decks, this is much more realistically a C, and something that you should definitely avoid if you're not really intending to go towards the Delirium plan at all. So I'm going to go with the middle of the road C, and in some decks you just definitely need to cut this, so be aware. Next up, we have Gavin II Unhallowed. Gavin II Unhallowed is 3 and a black for a creature zombie at common. It's a 2/4. Whenever another creature you control dies, put a +1/+1 counter on Gavin II Unhallowed. This seems pretty solid to me. It's a decent upgrade from Unruly Mob. It obviously costs 4 times as much of it, but it's not a weak little 1/1 to begin with. It's a 2/4, which blocks really, really well and is going to take some work to kill. You know, Fiery Temper doesn't kill this outside of combat damage and stuff like that. But if you can grow this even a couple of times, it's going to really start becoming a very serious problem. With some of the sack effects that look like might exist in a potential black-white deck, this is fairly nice. It's super weak to bounce, so watch out when you're up against blue, but I do think that this is a fine kind of high mid-pack pickup, and the first one seems probably always playable. The second one, you'll have to think about what your deck is exactly, but I'm going to go with a very solid C+ on this. Next up, we have Graf Harvest. Graf Harvest is a single black mana for an enchantment at uncommon. Zombies you control have menace. Pay 3 and a black and exile a creature card from your graveyard. Put a 2/2 black zombie creature token onto the battlefield. This looks surprisingly okay, despite my usual hatred for enchantments that just sit on the battlefield. This one is kind of feeling like Howlpack Resurgence almost, in that you can't just have a few zombies in your deck. You need to be the zombie deck. You need to have a critical mass of zombies, and then this gets pretty darn decent. Just like with Howlpack Resurgence, you needed to have a critical mass of werewolves, and then the card became really, really good. If you're not, then you're going to be in for a world of trouble. But if you do have that critical mass, I think this will be very playable. I definitely see this being pretty hard to deal with in that deck that just has a bunch of zombies. I'm going to go with a C+, because realistically it can't go much higher without there being some sort of power toughness boost or something like that. But the ability to give hopefully a significant portion of your creature's menace, plus when they die, turn them into another zombie, just seems pretty solid to me. I've got to go with a very, very solid C+ on it. Next up is Graf Rats. Graf Rats is 1 and a black for a creature rat at common. It's a 2/1, and it says, at the beginning of combat on your turn, if you both own and control Graf Rats and a creature named Midnight Scavengers, exile them, then meld them into Chittering Host. So, if you don't have Midnight Scavengers, this says 1 and a black, 2/1. So it's a Goblin Piker, which is playable-ish, especially if you're in an aggressive deck, but never really great. It's never really that amazing. Based on that, you generally don't want to have these in your deck or pick them unless you are aggressive, are desperate for creatures, or you have Midnight Scavengers in your deck too. We'll talk about Midnight Scavengers later, and we'll talk about the backside of those two cards later when we do finish up on Midnight Scavengers. But this card on its own is kind of like a C-, maybe a C. You want to play this if you are aggressive, and otherwise you want to kind of avoid it, as is common with basically every 2-1 for 2 ever printed. So, not talking about Chittering Host or anything like that, I am going to go with a C- for Graf Rats. Next up is Haunted Dead. Haunted Dead is 3 and a black for a creature zombie at uncommon. It's a 2/2. When Haunted Dead enters the battlefield, put a 1/1 white spirit creature token with flying onto the battlefield. Pay 1 and a black and discard 2 cards. Return Haunted Dead from your graveyard to the battlefield, tapped. 4 mana for a 3/3 with 1/1 of it being flying is, not too shabby. It's not a Gearpoor Gearcrafter or a Sandstep Outcast or Eldrazi Sky Spawner because it's not a 3-drop. You do pay a little bit extra for that extra toughness on the base body, but we do get the ability to bring this back. Discarding 2 cards and paying 1 a black to get that back is, it's not a huge cost, especially if you're madnessing at least one of those cards. And yeah, I do like this card. I think it seems fairly solid, and I think it is going to be, a decently high pick. I think it's totally fine on the first cast, and I think on the first bring back from the graveyard, it's pretty fine as well. I'm going to start potentially a little bit high on this at a B-. I do really, really, really like this card, and I think you should basically always play it in black when you have it, and I think it should be kind of like a high-mid pack pickup. So B- for me on Haunted Dead. Alright, we're 3 colors in and we haven't talked about Planeswalker, but that's going to change now. We have Liliana the Last Hope. Liliana the Last Hope is a 1 black Planeswalker Liliana at Mythic. She starts with 3 loyalty counters for that 3 mana. Her +1 says up to 1 target creature gets -2/-1 until your next turn. Her -2 says put the top 2 cards of your library into your graveyard, then you may return a creature card from your graveyard to your hand. Her -7 says you get an emblem with, quote, at the beginning of your end step, put X 2/2 black zombie creature tokens onto the battlefield where X is 2 plus the number of zombies you control. Let's get it out of the way. She is not Liliana the Veil, absolutely. But Planeswalkers don't get reprinted in expert level sets. That doesn't happen. If you were expecting that, you should have known you were setting yourself up for disappointment. So, she gets Weaken on a stick, which is nice. There are a sizable number of X1s in the format that it can kill, plus you could always activate this after combat and kill something off, or it could make combat math really a problem for your opponent. As well, it does function as a bit of protection because it lasts until your next turn. So that 2/2 that your opponent has can't attack Liliana next turn because now it's going to be an 0/1 until your next turn. So it is a decent level of protection. It also really helps weaken any sort of big threats that your opponent might have, allowing your blockers to handle them decently. Her -2 is that spell that I always talk about not caring about. Cemetery, Recruitment, Dutiful Return, Macabre Waltz, all of the card from graveyard to hand. But being repeatable and not costing a card is actually pretty fine by me. It basically will function as card draw, and decent card draw because you get to select the creature you want from your graveyard, and by milling a couple cards, you're going to keep your graveyard kind of full. Seems like a very, very solid -2 ability, especially in Limited. Her ultimate is probably one of the weaker ultimates we've seen lately for Limited. Obviously, in a dedicated, EDH zombie deck, it'll be insane, but in Limited, it's going to start out pretty darn slow. If you have no zombies on the board, it is going to take a few turns for you to build up that army until you can finally win, and you don't want to usually give your opponent time to do that. But it still probably should win you the game, but it is a little bit slow, and it is going to require Liliana to live for 4 full turns in order for you to go off with that. So, it is like basically every Planeswalker ultimate ever, win the game in Limited, but it is a little bit slow to get there and a little bit slow to go off unless you are heavily into zombies. I wouldn't actively go for that ultimate, but of course if it was there, I would take it. Really, I think Liliana is going to significantly function as kill the X1s, weaken the creatures, and then just sift through to your bombs. Use that -2 very, very, very frequently, and just get the creatures you need and get them out. I don't really want to build that ultimate, but as I said, if it's there, I'll go for it. So Liliana, I think, is just absolutely fantastic. She, of course, has the Planeswalker ability that says, freak your opponent out and stop them from attacking you, which is always good. I'm going to go with a solid A. There's no way I'm never not going to first pick her. She just seems super, super, super solid. Next up, we have Lilianas Elite. Lilianas Elite is 2 and a black for a creature zombie at uncommon. It's a 1/1. Lilianas Elite gets +1/+1 for each creature card in your graveyard. I foresee this card being a bit controversial, at least in the set review period. I think people are really going to range from terrible to amazing on this, and I think I'm somewhat closer to terrible. Not unplayable exactly, but I am closer to terrible than I am to amazing. Yeah, you know, if you have 10 cards in your graveyard, this thing's ridiculous. It's a 10-10, or sorry, an 11-11, but that's just not going to happen in the vast majority of games that you play. The trouble I see is that black decks seem to be wanting to get creatures into their graveyard and then out. They want to be exiling them to make zombies. They want to be returning them to the battlefield, returning them to their hand. Creatures in a black deck in Eldritch Moon don't seem to be making the graveyard a home. They're going to go to the graveyard, but then they're going to come back. So a good deal of the time, I feel like this is going to be a 1/1 for 3 on turn 3. And maybe even later into the game, it's going to be a 1/1 for 3, or maybe a 2/2 for 3. If it becomes a 3/3 for 3, cool, you played a vanilla test passing creature that does nothing else. The only place I see this card being solidly good is when you're really behind and you've been bleeding creatures. And that's generally not the hallmark of a good card. You don't play a card because it's really great when you're having a lot of trouble. You should play a card that is, you know, good there, but it's also decent when you're ahead and it helps break stalls. Those are the really good cards. So I'm going to start pretty low on this. I'm going to say it's generally cuttable unless you're definitely going to be rapidly filling your graveyard without any intentions of doing shenanigans. So I think this might actually function a little tiny bit better in a Delirium deck than it will in a zombie deck or something like that. But I still just don't see it being great. I'm going to cut it pretty reliably and put it at a C-. Next up, we have Markov Crusader. Markov Crusader is 4 and a black for a creature vampire knight at uncommon. It's a 4/3, has lifelink, and Markov Crusader has haste as long as you control another vampire. A 4/3 lifelinker for 5 can definitely swing some games, though it does die to some 3-drops with some serious regularity. All those 3/2s for 3 just straight up kill this for significantly less mana. The surprise haste would be nice in some situations, but you can't just always expect that you're going to be able to just get in with this for free on turn 5 when you have a vampire down. I don't think I want to go any higher than a C+ on this. 5 mana is starting to get to be a lot, especially in vampire decks that look to likely still want to be relatively aggressive and relatively low costed. I think you'll still play the first one with some regularity, but I don't think it's any better than that at all. So I'm going to go with a C+. Up next, we have Midnight Scavengers. Midnight Scavengers is 4 and a black for a creature human rogue at common. It's a 3/3. When Midnight Scavengers enters the battlefield, you may return target creature card with converted mana cost 3 or less from your graveyard to your hand. And of course, this melds with Graf Rats. So unlike Graf Rats, this card is 100% playable on its own. You don't have to have Graf Rats to play this card. It's very similar to Gravedigger, just slightly bigger and slightly more costly, and only allowing you to get 3 CMC or less creatures back. Still, getting to draw a card and getting a 3/3 is pretty darn solid. It's slightly expensive at 5 mana, but not enough to really truly hurt it. Like Graf Rats, this does go way up if you're going to get a Chittering Host out of it, and I do really like that you can bring the rat back if they've already died. Now, unlike Gisela and Bruna, where I had to dream crush everybody and say, guess what? You're probably never going to successfully draft those two together or open them in your sealed pool. These 2 cards are common. Odds are, especially in a small set, if you want to get these 2 cards, you probably can, which means you can attempt to create Chittering Host. The third meld set that we'll talk about in the red and the miscellaneous set reviews, I don't think you're probably going to get that one either. But this one, this is the chance for us to meld. So these 2 cards, if you control them both, they turn into Chittering Host. Chittering Host is a 5/6 creature eldrazi horror with haste. It has menace. When Chittering Host enters the battlefield, other creatures you control get +1/+0 and gain menace until end of turn. Chittering Host seems like a beating, a 5/6 that gives your team +1/+0 and menace will probably end a lot of games. And I think this almost kind of makes Scavengers a decent top end for an aggressive, wide deck. I think ultimately I'd probably want like 2 Graf Rats for every 1 Scavengers, just to ensure that you are going to draw those 2 cards. I think requiring drawing 2 specific cards is going to be the downfall of Meld in general, but when it does go off, I think it is going to be fairly solid. So I would actually be pretty happy in sort of a black, probably black-red aggressive deck with a couple of Graf Rats, a Midnight Scavengers, and just the ability to go wide between my 2-drop and my 5-drop slot. Flip myself a Chittering Host, and then just go to town. I'm definitely excited. I am going to try that out at least once during this format. Maybe it'll be awesome, maybe it'll be terrible, who knows, but I'm going to try it. I think it'll be at least decent, and this is your chance to meld. These 2 cards are the way that you're actually going to successfully meld, unless you are massively lucky. So Chittering Host, I can't really give a grade to it because it's so dependent on you getting those 2 cards, but I think it is something that you probably do want to attempt, that you do want to go for. I don't remember if I mentioned the grade for Midnight Scavengers. I believe it is a C+ on its own. Next up we have a reprint, and boy what a good reprint it is. Murder. Murder is 1 black for an instant at uncommon that says destroy target creature. Those are the only 3 rules text words on the card. Murder is really, 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 really good. It's not Doomblade, but it's the best removal that we've seen in a couple years, and it should probably be the first pick most times that you see it. You're rare, or it needs to be just an incredible bomb for you to not take Murder. The black is tough, so don't even think about splashing for this. You do need to be, playing black for realsies, but it is instant speed unconditional removal. You need to value this very, very highly. It should be an A-. You should first pick this in the vast majority of packs that you see it in. Next up, we have Noose Graph Mob. Noose Graph Mob is 4 black for a creature zombie at rare. It's a 0/0, but it does enter the battlefield with 5 +1/+1 counters, so it's a 6 mana 5/5. Whenever a player casts a spell, any player, any spell, remove a +1/+1 counter from Noose Graph Mob. If you do, which you have to, put a 2/2 black zombie creature token onto the battlefield. So basically, this is a 5/5 for 6, which is, 1 mana above the vanilla test, but that's kind of how things start to work at higher levels. And it is kind of interesting. So you're going to spend your turn playing this probably, and then your opponent will basically have to decide whether or not to give you a 2/2 and a 4/4. So suddenly, instead of having 5/5 power and toughness, you're going to have 6/6 power and toughness. If they have removal, they are going to get a 2/2 out of this, so it does replace itself with a less good creature if it does get snap removed. But if they don't have removal, your mob's just going to really start its progression towards doubling into a 10/10 if you do get the full value out of this thing. I think this is likely to be a little tiny bit too costly to be amazing, but I think it will really kind of feel unbeatable when it does get cast unless they have an immediate answer. I really want to play with it. I think it's going to be a really cool card and a really weird situation for your opponent to get out of. I'm going to go with a B on it. I will probably first pick it the first time I see it, and then potentially go down from there if it does turn out to be too costly. But I'm going to start at a B. Next up, we have Othe of Liliana. They couldn't make a 4-card cycle of oaths. There needed to be a black oath, and here we go. Othe of Liliana is 2 and a black for a legendary enchantment at rare, with possibly my favorite Liliana art I've seen. So stay tuned for the top 10 art of Eldritch Moon. And it says, when Othe of Liliana enters the battlefield, each opponent sacrifices a creature. It then says, at the beginning of each end step, if a planeswalker enters the battlefield under your control this turn, put a 2/2 black zombie creature token onto the battlefield. That's not going to happen. That's flavor text in most situations. Yeah, blah, blah, blah. Somebody's going to have an oath, and they're going to have Liliana or Tamiyo or Sorin or something like that. I've done it, but it's really, really rare. I've done it out of, 40, 50 limited matches of Magic. I've done it once. Yeah, it's just not going to happen. It's flavor text. So really, this is 2 and a black for an edict effect. A sorcery speed edict effect at that. So we just had To the Slaughter in Shadows of Innistrad, which is basically this card exactly, except it at least was instant speed. This is sorcery speed, so it's going to be pretty darn unplayable. Edicts just aren't what they used to be, especially if they aren't at instant speed. So I'm going to go with a C- on this. This should probably be passed around for quite a while, and then mid-pack, if you're in black and it's there, you can take it, I guess, but it's just not very good. You probably shouldn't have played To the Slaughter. You probably shouldn't play Othe of Liliana. Next up, we have Olivias Dragoon. Not Dragon, Dragoon. Olivias Dragoon is 1 and a black for a creature, vampire, berserker at common. Discard a card. It's a 2/2. Discard a card. Olivias Dragoon gains flying until end of turn. So it's just flat out a bear with upside, which means it's immediately a C+ at absolute worst, because you're always going to play this, even if you never trigger that effect, you're always going to play it. But you are going to trigger that effect because you're in black, and if you've got vampires, you're hopefully in black-red, which means there's madness, and this discard outlet doesn't cost you a single thing. Plus, it makes your 2/2 probably able to attack over your opponent's creatures. This seems like a relatively high pick common for me, kind of like high mid-pack. If I see it in a pack, and if I have any inclination that I even slightly want to go towards black-red vampires, black-red madness, I will be taking this card for sure. I'm actually going to bump this all the way up to a B-. I think it's slightly better than bear with an upside. I think it's bear with a good upside. So I will go with a B- on it. Maybe it's more realistically a C+, but absolutely no lower than that. Next up, we have Prying Questions. Prying Questions is 2 and a black for a sorcery at uncommon. Target opponent loses 3 life and puts a card from his or her hand on top of his or her library. No? Not really what I'm in the market for. 3 damage that only hits players is never really any good. Never a card you really want to put in your in your deck, which I guess is technically your library, as I was going to say. And having your opponent choose their next draw isn't very good either. It's a tempo play, sure, but a tempo play that your opponent has a decent amount of control over. Even worse, if they're hellbent, if they don't have any cards in their hand, you don't even get that much out of this because they have nothing to put on top anyways. I'm out on this card. I don't even think it should ever really be played. I've got to go with a D- on it. It just seems awful. Don't take this card. Don't play this card. It just seems bad. Rise from the Graves is next at 4 and a black for a sorcery at uncommon. Put target creature card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. That creature is a black zombie in addition to its other colors and other types. A reprint from Core Sets of Yore. This is from M13, M11, and M10, I think, and then a whole bunch of commander sets. This is better than many similar cards because of the simple words, a graveyard. Not your graveyard, a graveyard. You can reanimate one of your creatures, you can reanimate one of your opponent's creatures, and that's not too bad. 5 mana is a little bit pricey, but this is right at home in a mid-range deck with solid removal, where you can deal with your opponent's bombs and then bring them back as your own. This should be cut in a more aggressive deck, or a deck that's lighter on removal. Basically, don't play with the assumption that this is a second copy of your bomb. You may not draw your bomb, or play your bomb, or it might get exiled. But in a mid-rangey deck with a lot of removal where you're going to be killing your opponent's creatures, this should be fairly solid, enough to be a C+. Next up, we have Ruthless Disposal. Ruthless Disposal is 4 and a black for a sorcery at uncommon. As an additional cost to cast Ruthless Disposal, discard a card and sacrifice a creature. What do you get for all that? Well, 2 target creatures each get -13/-13 until end of turn. This is another card that I think is going to be a little bit controversial, and I think is going to go from people think it's amazing to people thinking it's unplayable. So it's a 5 mana sorcery speed removal card, which is a little bit gross there already. And unless you madness something, you do 3 for 2 yourself. You spend this card, you discard a card, you sacrifice a creature, and you get to kill 2 creatures. So you 3 for 2 yourself. Ideally, you're discarding a land or something terrible, and you're sacrificing, I don't know, a 1/1 or a 2/2 zombie token that you already have several of. But that's not always going to be the case. You're not always going to have that option. Madness isn't really an option either, because you're already paying 5 mana for this. You know, maybe you can get a Fiery Temper out of it and make this into a 6 mana transaction. But anything higher than that, and you're looking at 7 mana, 8 mana, 9 mana, if you do want to cast like a Blood Mad Vampires too. If you want to cast like a Twins of Mauer Estate. So I don't know about this. I don't know about this at all. This is also dead if you top deck it. If you have no cards in hand, you can't play it. If you're behind, you don't have any creatures on board, you can't play this. If your opponent has 1 creature on board, it does not say up to 2. You're going to have to kill another one of your creatures, and at that point, you're 4 for 1ing yourself. You sacked a creature, you killed one of your own, you discarded a card, you cast this card to kill one of their creatures. Ultimately, those costs and restrictions just are way too numerous to me. I'm going to start out on this. I'm going to treat it as second string removal, kind of like a throttle, and go with a C-. I think it could even be significantly worse than that. I don't know about this card. That rules text, 2 target creatures get -3/-3, -13, -13. Sounds amazing, but the costs and restrictions are huge. So I'm going to start at C-. I'm ready to be wrong on it, but I'm going to start really low. Next up is Scursdag Supplicant. Scursdag Supplicant is 2 and a black for a creature human cleric at common. She's a 2/3, and you can pay a black, tap, and discard a card to have each player lose 2 life. A 2/3 for 3 is the less good cousin of a 3/2 for 3, but this is an okay discard outlet, although it is a little bit costly. You're paying a black, you're tapping a creature, this creature specifically, and you're paying 2 life, because it's each player, not each opponent. I don't know about this. Taking on a 2 life loss for every madness spell that you want to cast, you do get to hit your opponent for 2, so, you know, it's a kind of a neutral kind of thing as long as you're on equal footing, and a good thing if you're ahead and a bad thing if you're behind is just not a cost that I think I really want to pay. If I'm desperate for a madness outlet, I guess I could take this, but I think ultimately this probably just gets cut a whole lot of the time. 23rd card if you really need just a creature and you don't even really plan on activating it. And hey, maybe here or there you actually do get to win a game with it just by paying them for 2 to finish them off, but I don't know. I'm pretty out on it. I'm going to go with a C- to start. Next up, we have Strange Augmentation. Strange Augmentation is a single black mana for an enchantment aura at common. Enchant creature. Enchanted creature gets +1/+1. Delirium. Enchanted creature gets an additional +2/+2 as long as you have Delirium. So this can go as high as +3/+3. Pre-Delirium, this is way too low impact to ever deserve a card slot in your deck. Like F-level low impact. Post-Delirium, it almost becomes a card, but realistically, this is an effect that we would see on like an end of the battlefield trigger of a really good real creature. So we'd get a creature +1/+1, or even a creature ++3/+3 counters. Taking up a card, opening yourself up for a 2 for 1. I'm out. I'm never touching this card. Got to go with a D- on it. Next up, we have Stromkirk Condemned. Stromkirk Condemned is a black creature vampire horror at rare. It is a 2/2, and you can discard a card to give vampires you control +1/+1 until end of turn. Activate this ability only once each turn. So this is interesting. It's going to depend on the vampire deck being a thing, and it looks like it's kind of still there with support from the Shadows over Innistrad pack. This is, you know, a little bit harder to cast Bear because it's color 2/2 rather than 1 and a color for a 2/2. But with a decent number of vampires, this can make combat pretty difficult for your opponent. Your opponent has to basically always assume, as long as you have a card in hand, that your vampires are all going to be a little bit bigger than they actually look. I don't think this is going to be super first pickable. And if you're not heavily in vampires, I think this drops to just mildly playable. But if you are in vampires, if you are in madness, I think this goes up a fair bit. And I think it could be first pickable in a weakish pack, but you should pass it over for premium removal, for premium on common bombs, things like that. So I'm going to go with kind of like a C+, B- on it. I think ultimately it's going to be kind of C+, C+-ish. Next up, we have Succumb to Temptation. Succumb to Temptation is 1 black for an instant at common, and it says you draw 2 cards and you lose 2 life. It's Sign in Blood, except worse in many ways. It's not black, it's 1 black. You can't target your opponent. You can only target yourself. It doesn't even target, technically. That's harsh. It's still probably totally playable despite that, and playable enough in aggro and even more so in mid-range to control-y decks. Probably shouldn't be a super high pick, but kind of mid-pack, even high-ish mid-pack seems totally fine. And I think the first one is basically always going to be playable as long as you are prominently black so that you can pay the black, plus that 1 generic tax for no apparent reason. It's a less good Sign in Blood, but a less good Sign in Blood is still a pretty decent card, so I'm going to go with a C+ on it. Next up, we have Thraben Foulbloods. Thraben Foulbloods is 2 and a black for a creature zombie hound at common to 3/2, and it has Delirium. Thraben Foulbloods gets +1/+1 and has Menace as long as you have Delirium. So it's a 3/2 for 3, which is always totally filler playable. And if you have Delirium, it gets a little bit bigger. It becomes a 4/3 with Menace, which seems pretty darn good, actually. So really, you're always going to play this as a filler 3/2 if you need it, and it's even slightly better than that if you do have a chance of getting Delirium. So I'm willing to go with a C+. This is kind of like a bear with an upside, just it's not a bear. It's a 3/2 for 3. So C+ for me. Tree of Perdition is the next card. Tree of Perdition is 3 and a black for a creature plant at Mythic. It's an 0/13 defender, and you can tap it to exchange target opponent's life total with Tree of Perdition's toughness. So you can play this on turn 4 if your opponent's at 20. On the next turn, when it doesn't have Summoning Sickness, you tap it and say, haha, you're at 13 now. And then your tree is an 0/20. Which is a pretty darn good blocker. Tree of Redemption, though, has seen better days. I think this card is going to bring out the results-oriented thinking in everybody. They're always going to think about those times where you get the, 0/13 becoming an 0/20 and your opponent becoming 13 kind of deal. And that's just not how it's always going to happen. There are going to be times where you get this on turn 4 and your opponent's already dropped down to, 14 or even 13, at which point this does nothing. And in the late game, this really does absolutely nothing other than be an 0/13 if your opponent has taken enough damage. I do think it is still a decent enough card, especially in a rather controlling deck, because it's one heck of a blocker. It's going to block basically everything on the ground that exists in this format. So I think it is still a fine enough card. I think you'll probably first pick it, obviously, in the first week or two because it's going to be worth a few dollars. I think it's at like $5 or $6 right now. And I think it'll be fine. It'll do some good blocking for you, but that's not the plan that you should be having in Limited, especially. Your plan shouldn't be, aha, I can block everything, because you don't win by blocking. You stop yourself from losing by blocking for some amount of time. This also doesn't have reach. I guess it's not a very tall tree. It seems fine. I'm willing to give it a C+. I don't think it's too much better than that, just because it doesn't do what everybody wants it to do once your opponent slips past 13 life. So I'm going to go with a C+ on it. I think it's fine. I think it's always playable. I just don't think it's a super ridiculously high pick. Vampire Cutthroat is up next. Is a single black mana for a creature vampire rogue at uncommon. It's a 1/1 with Skulk and Lifelink. I'm not super impressed by this. Lifelink is cool and all, but this is still a 1/1 for 1. And honestly, I became a little less impressed with Skulk in general, Farbog Revenant especially, by the end of the format, because I think this compares very well to Farbog Revenant. Farbog Revenant just didn't do quite what it did. At the start of the format, it seemed amazing. Everybody was playing them and attacking in with them and dealing so much damage and gaining so much life. And then they just really fell off, and they just kind of stopped doing anything. This one's a more relevant creature type than Farbog Revenant, but it cannot block. It can chump block once, and that's about it. I don't see myself ever wanting to play this card. It's just way too low impact. I'm out on it. I've got to give it a D. Next up is Voldaren Pariah. Voldaren Pariah is 3 black for a creature vampire horror at rare. It's a 3/3. It has flying. Sacrifice 3 other creatures. Transform Voldaren Pariah. You can also madness it for black if you can discard it and have 3 black kicking around. So you've got to sacrifice 3 whole creatures. This had better be good, right? Well, it flips on over, becomes a 6/5, creature Eldrazi vampire. It also has flying, and when this creature transforms into Abolisher of Bloodlines, target opponent sacrifices 3 creatures. If you can get some decent token production going, vampire tokens from Call of Bloodlines, or zombie tokens, or whatever, or even spirits if you're in black-white, then sacking 3 measly little 1/1 vampires or 1/1 spirits to clear a significant portion, if not all, of your opponent's board, plus having a 6/5 flyer left behind, sounds like game over to me. It's only slightly overcosted as a 3/3 flyer at that, and the madness cost is a little silly being black, but it's super cheap for a 3/3 flyer. I think this card is always playable, and I think it's probably also always first pickable. I think it is going to be pretty darn bomby. You do want to make sure that you do head towards a wide deck, preferably tokens, so be it zombies, be it spirits, be it vampires, be it whatever, but I think it is still a very solid first pick, and I'm pretty happy giving this a solid B+. Next up is Wailing Ghoul. Wailing Ghoul is 1 and a black for a creature zombie at common. When Wailing Ghoul enters the battlefield, put the top 2 cards of your library into your graveyard. And it's also a 1/3. This seems pretty meh to me. There's better ways to enable Delirium. There's way better ways to get relevant cards into your graveyard. This probably should be a relatively late pick and only mildly playable in a mid-range or control-y deck that's really trying to do Delirium or trying to do some graveyard shenanigans and for some reason didn't get better ways of doing it, or needs a blocker to survive those first few turns. I don't think this is a card you really want to take highly at all. I think if you want it, you should be able to pick it up pretty late in the pack. I've got to go with a C- on it. Next up, we have Weirded Vampire. Weirded Vampire is 3 and a black for a 3/3 creature vampire horror at common, and it has Madness for 2 and a black, and that is all. So it's overcosted at 4, and it's vanilla costed for Madness, and that's about all I can say. It's total filler with a minimal upgrade if you do have a vampire synergy or Madness synergy going on. Cut it, don't cut it, feel okay either way. It should be a pretty late pack pickup, so flat out C. Cut it, don't cut it. We made it. The final card in black is Whispers of Emrakul. Whispers of Emrakul is 1 and a black for a sorcery at uncommon. Target opponent discards a card at random. Delirium. If you have Delirium, that player discards 2 cards at random instead. So, yeah, you know what's a decent card in Limited? Hymn to Turak. Hymn to Turak is pretty okay, and the reason for that is the word random. Mind Rot is playable in sealed in some formats and some decks, but your opponent gets to choose those 2 cards, and that's the reason that it's kind of playable and not playable. Random is much, much, much better because your opponent has no control over it. You may just hit their bomb. You may royally screw up their curve. There's so much that can go wrong here. Now, the fact that this is half of a Hymn to Turak without Delirium being enabled is not great. You don't really want to play this as half a Hymn to Turak despite being the same mana cost, although 1 and a black instead of black. If you can enable Delirium pretty darn quickly and pretty darn reliably, then this becomes just an easier to cast Hymn to Turak, which is pretty darn solid. I think this really does depend explicitly on how quickly and how consistently you can enable your Delirium. But if you can, I do think it is a decent enough pickup. I think it's kind of like a solid C that could go up even higher. I think the ceiling on this is much more like a B- almost, or a C+. I think people are going to underestimate this to begin with, at least the Delirium half of it, and we'll see how it shakes out. But I'm going to start with a solid... No, let's be generous here. Let's start with a solid C+. All right, so that's going to wrap it up for black. Black looks really interesting. It's got fantastic removal. It has Murder. Murder is back. It has Boon of M. It's got Liliana herself. It's got some really awesome stuff. It has probably your one chance to actually try out Meld with any reliability in Limited. It looks like a really cool color. I want to play it in pre-release. I think it's one of the colors that I definitely want to play, and I foresee myself drafting it a little bit heavily. But let me know what your favorite card was. Let me know what cards you disagree with, what cards you think should be rated differently, all down in the comments below. As always, if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, you can find me on Twitter at The Mana Leek. You can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/TheManaLeek and twitch.tv/TheManaLeek. You've already found me here on YouTube. You've got that comment section down below. Make use of that. Click that thumbs up icon if you like it. Click the subscribe button if you haven't already, so you make sure to keep up to date on all the latest videos as they get posted. As well, share these set reviews. Share them with your friends, with your local game store, forums, Reddit, wherever. And as always, if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, let me know. Otherwise, see y'all tomorrow for Red.